Okay, all right, here we go. So today, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go through a bunch of different information for all of you about how to research your properties in San Francisco. I may need longer than an hour. I have about 90 slides, so I'm going to try to be as quick as possible, but I'm trying not to go too fast. So if I am going too fast, just give me a heads up. Please stay on mute for the call, and if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but I will not respond to them until the end of the presentation. I won't be able to multitask quite that effectively. All right, so here's what we're going to do today. We're going to start with who am I and do I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to give a broad overview of a lot of different ways that the property research I'm going to teach you about can be useful for you. It's not just for fun. There's a lot of ways that this can help you if you're doing a project at your house or if you're trying to do a renovation, stuff like that. If you get stuck with a violation, there's a lot of ways this can help you. I'm going to go through where to look for the records, how to get started, where the starting point is, how to get permit records, and then identify who owned it, who lived in it, and are there any photos of it. And embedded in these is also newspaper articles. So that's also kind of captured in here a little bit. So who am I? I am an architect. I've been practicing in San Francisco now for 22 years, originally from North Dakota, but I hate snow and I never wanted to see it again. And I just fell madly in love with San Francisco one spring break in college and decided this is where I was gonna get up and drink my coffee every day. And my family thought I was a little bit nuts. So I moved out here, and then my university alma mater used to come out here and do studios for the fourth year students where they would study urban, like a big urban environment. And I gave them tours. So I had to do a ton of research on the city history and give them these tours. I own and operate a small architecture practice. We have, there's 6 of us all together, and our specialty is accessory dwelling units. So if anybody is thinking about adding a second unit, I am doing a separate seminar about that that's also free. And it's going to be at the end of September, and I will circulate information about that afterwards as well. I'm a really big housing advocate. It's really a huge part of my practice and just mission to build as much housing as I can. So this is really a personal kind of mission for me. So why do you want to do the research? All right, maybe you want to just do it for fun. Maybe you are planning an addition or a remodel. Maybe you have a multi-family building, like an apartment building, and there's some discrepancy about how many apartments you actually have in that building. Maybe you're writing a book. Maybe you need it for a permit. And I'm going to break this down just a little bit for you. So in San Francisco, buildings are identified in 3 different classifications, A, B, and C. A is you are definitely a historic resource. B is you're 45 years old, so you might be, but in the planning review, they're going to treat you as part of a project. Like, let's say you want to just replace your windows. They're going to treat you like you are a Class A historic resource, and it's going to limit the kind of options you have for, say, the windows that you would install. Same thing for additions. A Class B gets treated like it's historic automatically, even if it may not be, and so you're not able to do as many things on the front. You're not able to make as many changes on the front as you might want to. And C is you're not historic, the end. So if you do have a Class B building, and maybe you are planning a big remodel or addition, you want to have the building recertified. You want to have it certified, definitively one way or the other, either an A or a C. There is a process that the planning department will do that will allow you to have that determination made. Sometimes your B building gets downgraded to a Class C and it gives you more flexibility. Sometimes it gets graded up and you're in an A and you're doing the same thing you would have had to do for the B anyway. So to formally submit this application to planning, it requires a lot of information, full permit history, copies of all the permit plans and permits, a list of all the owners and their occupations, a list of all the tenants and their occupations, historic photos, and newspaper articles. And this is something that I do in my practice, not a lot, but fairly regularly for my clients. So these are all the things that we're gonna talk about today. Has everybody used the property information map? My guess is probably mixed bag, yes and no. The property information map is a city-funded website. It's really helpful. They've consolidated all this information together for you. It's really easy. You run an address search up here, and then you go to this historic preservation tab right here, and you're going to see whether or not what your classification is, A, B, or C. So that's kind of how you find out what the city thinks that you have for your property. The second piece of this is that you may also be in a historic district. So think about like Alamo Square. Every building that fronts onto Alamo Square is treated as a very high Class A historic resource. And that means because it's in this special use district, this special district, even adding a skylight to your house, even if it's in the back, even if you're changing your windows in the back, you will have to go through a much more extensive review. There's something called, I don't know why they called it this, a certificate of appropriateness. And it's an application that gets submitted to the planning department as part of whatever project is that you're doing. So again, it requires all the same information that a historic resource evaluation would require. But the thing is, once you've done the research and you have it, you can use the same thing for every project going forward. So if you are in a landmark district, you're gonna need to do a lot of research. And it's the same website that you go to, and it's the same page. You're just looking over here to see if you're in a designated historic landmark. So
what's the website again, Serena?
It's the property information map. And I'm gonna, at the end of this, probably like in the next few days, maybe by the end of the week, I'm basically gonna put all the links that I've included in this presentation together for you and send it to you. So you guys will all have the access to that stuff. So this is a really easy site. I use it in my practice literally every day. Okay. Maybe you're not sure how many units you have. This is something I do a lot. I deal with a lot of apartment buildings and SRO buildings where the number of units has been confused over time as things have been added, removed, modified, things like that. And oftentimes what one department of the city, like planning, has is different than what the housing department has or different than what the assessor's office has. So that can be a source of friction for at least some of my clients. I'm going to talk about 3R reports separately, so don't worry about that. And then violations are another thing. So if you have a second unit maybe, or you've got some space on the ground floor behind the garage that has some space in it, maybe it's just a family room and a bathroom, and you take in a permit to do a revision, the planning department or the building department might say like, hey, we think this is illegal. And doing this research can help you prove to them that no, this always was here as part of the house. Or it may prove the opposite, but at least you know which path you have to take to resolve those issues. Okay, so I'll show you how to do the unit count. So it's the same website. You go to the property tab up here instead. And then over here, you're going to see this thing that says Assessor Summary. And if you click on that, you're going to get this little pop-up. So this property has 6 units in it. And if my property owner says like, oh no, I've got 8 or I've got 7, there's one that's not counted in here. That's something that we would then do a little bit of digging on. The interesting thing about this, this number comes from the assessor's office, and it also includes commercial spaces. So if you have a building that maybe has 2 commercial spaces on the ground floor, this will actually count that. So there needs to be a little bit of math done to help figure out, you know, did they count that big commercial space as 1 unit? Did they count it as 2? That can cause a little bit of confusion as well. Maybe you need to do the research for a permit. So I often have to produce copies of old permits, especially if we're doing structural changes or, like I said, to prove that that family room behind the garage was always installed. I also spend a lot of time at records, and I just cry every time I hear somebody come in that's opening a new business and they don't know how to figure out how to find the plans that show whether or not the front door or the bathroom were made ADA compliant. So these are things that help also with commercial properties. Okay, now let's get into the meaty part. Where are you going to look? These are the primary places that I go. The public library on the 6th floor is a wealth of information, and they actually have these amazing pamphlets and amazing handouts that help you understand what all the options are for you to dig through in their records, and they're very, very helpful there. City Hall, the assessor's office specifically, has a lot of records we're going to go through. The building department, the records department at the building department also has basically all the permit records. And then there's some online resources that I'm going to share for photos and newspaper articles and things like that. So the public library, the 6th floor is a very special place if you haven't been there before. They will not, they are like that, they protect that place like the jewel of the Maharaj, okay? So when you get in, you have to sign in, you can't just wander in. You have to give them your photo ID. You have to check in any bags you have. You're not allowed to carry your bag around in there. You cannot have a pen. So they will confiscate your pens and give you pencils. You can, though, take pictures with your phone. That's no problem. You are not allowed to take anything off of this floor or out of this room, but you can request copies of pretty much everything that they have. There is a little bit of a waiting period, and you may need to pay. You will need to pay for copies if you're getting something printed, but it's not very expensive. City Hall, the assessor's office, it's open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They're not open on the weekends, so if you need to do some research there, you've got to go during the workday. The building department records office is open Monday through Friday as well. They have shorter hours on Wednesday. They start a little bit later because they have an all-hands staff meeting on Wednesday mornings, but generally they're open from 7:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. So again, if you need to go pick something up from them, you'll need to make time kind of during the day. Okay, now getting started. Here we go. Start with the address. I know that sounds really stupid, but addresses often have changed over time. And so you may be researching a property and have found out that you're looking for 1765 Oak, but you can't find anything prior to like 1920. And the reason is it used to be 1721 Oak, or it used to be 1765 Army. It used to have a different name on the street or something. So finding the actual street number is the very #1 first step you have to take to make sure that you can find everything. So I'm gonna walk you through this really step-by-step. You're gonna need something called the lot and block number. That's your parcel number. This is a number that you will use in 20 different record researches. So when you find it, write it down and keep it with you. So you're going to start with finding your lot and block number, and then you're going to go to the fire insurance maps online, and that's what you can see a picture of here. So this is available through the library, and I'm going to walk you just step by step through it. You will need your library card to log in to get to this. Okay, so you go back to the property information map, just like we've been before. Go to the property tab. You've run your address search up here. And then you're going to see parcel, block, and lot number right here, 0777 005. And then down here, you're going to see the assessor's block map. So you're going to want to click on that, and it's going to open up a very modern version of the FIMO. And this is a particular corner lot, but the reason I'm showing this to you and the reason you want to have this handy is that you may have a property that's in the middle of the block. And over time, the lots next to you have been subdivided or expanded, and it's really difficult to see in the really old maps where your site was. So keep it handy, and I'll show this to you in more detail as well. Then you log in through the library. They have a really handy link, and I'll share that with you, to the FIMO database. They have 2 ways you can search. You can search by a city. I don't recommend this because you will be wading through these drawings trying to find where your house is, but the interactive map is very, very well indexed. It's great. So up here, you just type in your address. You can type in the old address or the new address, whatever it is, and you hit go. It's gonna pull up a list of these maps where these appear. So there's one from 1889, 1899, 1913, et cetera, 1950. 1950 is the most modern one. That was kind of the last year that they did these. So when you click on one of these, I clicked on, I think, the 1913. Yeah, 1913. You want to start here. This very first page is the map of the whole district that's encapsulated in this volume. So we're in volume 4, which you can kind of see right here. And when you click on it, it opens up the big map. You can see all these goofy colors. And then you want to just figure out on the map where your site is. So I'm looking for 1765 Oak, which is going to be on Oak between Clayton and Ashbury. And see this number 400 on here. Then you go back over here and you scroll down until you see the number 400. And when you click on 400, you're going to get the block map just for that one block. Now, there's some missing properties here. There's some wide lots. There's some things that haven't been developed yet. And if you put your old map side by side next to the, if you put your new map next to the old map, you're going to see, okay, you want to count. Sometimes you have to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but here 1, 2, these two were merged. And you have to use these visual clues, like our lot gets deeper and it's the second one that's deeper. And so that's going to give you exactly which one's yours. I will tell you this is a little challenging. Sometimes they're oriented differently. Sometimes they're upside down or backwards. But then if you zoom in on it, you'll see, and it's upside down, I know, this says 1721. And so my 1765 address was previously 1721. So now I know what the original address for the property is. If you're on a corner, you might have many addresses. You might have addresses on both sides of the street. Just make sure as you go through each of these FIMO maps that you're writing down all the addresses that might have been at some point attached to your property, because city records, many of them are stored by number instead of by block and lot number, and so it can get a little bit confusing. And if you want to really get all the records, search all the addresses, even though it takes a little bit more time. These maps are cool in general. If you want to geek out on them, you'll see they're color coded. They have this nice key, which I'll also share with you guys. It's always hard to find when you're looking at these, but the colors mean what the building's made out of. Yellow means it's a wood frame building. Pink means it's probably brick or tile. Blue means it's concrete, possibly some steel. And then on them, on each of the little buildings, there might be other labels. You'll see D oftentimes for dwelling. If I go back. So here you can see 2B, that means it's a 2-story building with a basement. D means it's a dwelling, so it's used for housing. Back here is a 1-story with a basement. So there's a little 1-story addition on the back and a little 1-story addition on the front. And so the FIMO maps kind of help you get a little bit more information too. Basement is a really misleading term, but it is very commonly used in these old records. Basement in California and San Francisco means ground floor. So don't think that means it was excavated. And basement under the building code has a very specific definition, but in olden times, basement just meant ground floor. So now you know the address, you can find out when it was built. If it was built prior to 1906 because of the fire and the earthquake, you're going to go to the water records because those were housed in a different location. If it was built after 1906, you're going to be able to find those records just at the building department, just from the permit search. So either way, you know, save yourself some time if you don't have to go to the water records. The water records look like this. They are available also from the public library. There's a really easy source. You just log in and use your library card. The books are organized by street name, but it does take quite a bit of going through many pages of this document. The search function in this doesn't really work, so you kind of do have to go page by page trying to find it. And because they wrote these by hand, if they ran out of room, they sometimes would go to the back of the book and start a new page, or they would start a new page somewhere in the middle. So it does get a little bit time consuming. But in this case, I was able to find this, and I'm going to show you a zoom in of it. The cursive handwriting is really tricky to read, and you'll see this is on many, many documents. You're going to see a lot of different versions of it, and it does get tricky, but here you can see February 25th, and this is a 91, and you kind of, if you look at the other records around it, you'll be able to help decipher a little bit. So that's how you know when the water was turned on. Effectively, that was when the building was built. And then the name that you see here is usually the owner. Sometimes it's the contractor. This one says R, looks like a C. This could be a D, could be an S. And then over here you see number 1721. And so that's how you know you have the right property. Sometimes they actually will put a little note on here when the address changed. So sometimes there's a little clue. But anyway, there's other things on this page that are interesting if you're looking at it, but that's the general idea. Okay, if it was built after 1906, you can get the records online in a way. You can request the records online. So this form on the right, which I'm going to walk you through, is a really easy records request form. You're going to fill this out and you're going to submit it to the records department at the Department of Building Inspection. I'm just going to call that DBI. DBI is our standard term. You email it into this email address. Sometimes they can just email you back with all the records, and sometimes you have to go pick them up in person. For single family homes, you're not going to have a billion records, most likely. If you have a large apartment building, there will be tons of permits, and this will be a much longer list of documents. But for single family homes, a lot of work didn't even require permits back in the day. So, you most likely they'll be able to email this stuff to you. And I'm going to show you exactly what to fill out on here. And I'll share this form with you guys at the end as well. Make sure to put all the possible addresses. So again, the old address before it changed, the new addresses. I always get all the permit applications and I get all sheets. All sheets is really important because otherwise they just give you the front and the back. But when you get all sheets, you get copies of like inspection reports with a really detailed list of violations maybe. You find out some crazy stuff about the past owners and how they did or didn't take care of their properties. So make sure you get all sheets. And then you also want to get this certificate of final completion, all of the CFCs. That is a document that's issued at the completion of a pretty big project. So like if you changed the number of units or added a story or did an addition or changed the use, maybe you changed from 2 units to 3, so you went from a single family home to an apartment building. These are really useful. I don't usually get electrical permits or plumbing permits or violations and complaints, but you can get those too if you want them. They're happy to attach those. I'm not going to tell you to check this box for plans, and there's a very specific reason, is that they will not give them to you. And I'm going to go through that in a lot more detail. So when you do this, you're going to get the old permit applications. And again, it's a lot of cursive writing. It's quite small. Some of these are scanned in a way that are very difficult to read. So get your magnifying glass out and, your prescriptive lenses. But here you can see Mr. and Mrs. S. DeMaria with the address. It was 2 flats. Here's where it was built. Here's where it was in relationship to the corner of the property, of the lot, the block. And then this little stamp that you see right here, April 2nd, it does say 1928, which I know is a little bit hard to read. You can kind of see up here, there's also a March 29, 1928. And then if you go to the next page, the second page of this is the meat of the permit application. So this is all that they needed to build a house in the 1920s. There were no drawings required. So this basically told the builder and the city the size of all the studs, the size of the floor joists, the roof joists, what the building's made out of, if the foundation is concrete or if it's brick, that's right here. It's a wood frame building, it was built in this location, 2 units, etc. And then there's also really good stuff on these. So you can see here, you've got the owner names, Mr. and Mrs. S. De Maria. You're going to want to write the names down so it's easier to find. And then over here, you're going to see, it looks like it could be an A, M, Cumio, and a V, and it's Massarie, Massario, Massaria. So, when it's hard to read, write down what you think are sort of the more conventional misspellings, because honestly, you're going to go through a lot of records where it's going to be really hard to tell what's an E or an A or a V or an M. And it helps when you're sleuthing this out. So now that you know what year it was built, you can go to the library, and they have these amazing books where every contract that a builder entered into with a property owner was filed. And they're organized really well. They're really nice. And that way you can help read their names more clearly. The books are very, very big, unlike some of the digital records, which are scanned and difficult to see. So there's 2 big sets of books that they have there that are really helpful. They look like this. They're monstrous. All the books are organized by date. And the first half of the book, you search by the owner's name. And if you don't know the owner, you go to the second half of the book and you can search by the contractor's name. And so in this one, I was able to kind of dig through. Again, it's all handwritten, but I was able to see, okay, this is visibly an E. This is actually visibly an N. And these 2 guys did other work together. Here, it's harder to see that that's a C. This looks like an A. and a W. I did find out later that it was an A, and his name was in these records on another property, written out differently. And the V for Masari was Virgil. So while you're looking through these books, do kind of go through them and look at other people's contracts, because like I said, whoever was writing in the book that day may have had really terrible handwriting compared to somebody the next day. And so it does help if you're really trying to get it exactly right. Okay, permit records. Here's how you get permit records. You can get records from the building department, the planning department, and the assessor's office doesn't have permits, but they do have something called assessor's building cards, which are really useful. So starting with the building department, we've already kind of gone through this because we already showed you how to submit the application. This office is located at the corner of Van Ness and Mission. It is set way back from the street though. You have to like walk down a long outdoor courtyard to get there. To go to the records office, it's on the 4th floor. You have to check in at the front desk on the right, and then they send you across the lobby to the security guard, and then he sends you up the elevator to the records department. It's sort of silly, but whatever. I've already given you the hours. They are not open on the weekends. So, and they do shut down really promptly at 3:30. This department, when you walk in, it can be kind of confusing, and there's nobody to greet you. The people that are greeting you are really far away, but there's a little computer that you log into and you type in what you're looking for. It's the exact same form that I already showed you on their computer. And if you need help, you just ask them and they'll come out from behind the desk and help you. They're very, very friendly. So at this office, you can get copies of all the applications, which you probably already got online. This is where you go to get the permit drawings. It's a very rigorous process. I'm going to go through it with you. Then also 3R reports, and I'll show you what those are. So a 3R report is something that actually every real estate agent, when they're selling a property, has to run a copy of this record. It's about $148, plus there's the processing fee. It takes 7 to 10 days to get a copy of it, but effectively the building department has made a list of every permit that's ever been filed for the property, what the status of the permit is, what the numbers of the permit, the dates are. And then it has a bunch of other information on here, like how many units, what kind of zoning district you're in, approximate year built. And I'll tell you, these are not the most accurate documents. This is only coming from the records of one department. So I often have to work with my clients and the city to correct things that are not correct on this document. But it is a very good start. It does give you a nice long list. They do not run the searches for the previous addresses here. So you will probably find more records if you use whatever that old address was, that old building number was. You'll find more things than they have in this. A certificate of final completion, I've talked about a little bit. It's basically this printed document that tells you, what kind of construction it is. That's really for me, not for most homeowners. How many stories it is usually. This one was for an apartment building. It says 6 families and 1 guest room, and there was a violation associated. So these were all the violation items that were cleaned up on the permit. So these really document the exact last on record use and occupancy of the building. Very handy, very useful. Now here's how you get plans, and it is complicated and you will want to cry a little bit, but don't worry. Records has a in San Francisco, other cities don't do this. Other cities, it's really easy. You go to the records department at the building department, you say, I want copies of plans for this project. Maybe you need a letter from the property owner that says, yes, this person can have them, and they will give them to you within a week. In San Francisco, they treat every set of building plans like it's owned by Julia Morgan. And they assume the copyright has continued indefinitely and that the dead architect may still have some rights to those drawings. And so they make you check in at the desk. First, you look at all the plans. You have to write down on every plan set if there are any architects or engineers, their license number, their name, and put in a formal application. And then they send a certified letter out to each of those people to make sure that they're okay releasing the drawings to you. So it can take a long time. If you are not the owner of the property, okay, you also have to bring in this form on the right. And I'll tell you, all of my clients get this one wrong. So whoever is picking up the plans, their name goes at the top, the property address, and then the owner's name. And if the owner is a trust or an LLC or some other kind of corporation, the person's name that goes here has to be the person that's listed on the California Secretary of State documents. Otherwise, records will not release anything to you and you'll have to go back. This document has to be notarized and signed, and you have to bring the original wet signed copy with you to the records office or they will not give you anything. And you can only, this is only good for 30 days. So if you get one of these from the owner and you don't make it to the records office in time, or you go there and they reject your paperwork, or they're busy and they close before you finish, I mean, it does have a ticking clock. So it's a little bit of a pain in the neck. And then it does take 30 to 45 days before they will print and give you copies. And the copies they're going to give you are going to be 11 by 17s, but they are pretty good copies, usually quite legible, usually scanned at pretty good resolution. Make sure if you're there and you're looking for really old documents to ask for the microfilm, because they'll mostly show you the digital records, the things that have been scanned, and those are from like about the 1980s onward. But there oftentimes are things that are older. Having said that, single family homes or even 2-unit buildings didn't really require drawings for any alterations up until the 1950s. So there may not be a lot to find. So don't be discouraged. Don't be disappointed. It's still worth running the search though, because you'll find things that you may not have found. Okay, the planning department has records and their search is really easy. You literally email them your list of addresses. You have no forms to fill out. You just say, I want all planning records for the property located at this address or these addresses. And they will email them right back to you within a week. So sometimes their files may have photos. I've seen some really cool photos come from the planning department. Because maybe in the past someone was getting a variance for an addition, or somebody was getting a conditional use to change something on the ground floor, or some neighbor complained about their property, whatever the thing was that they were trying to build. If it went through planning, they're going to have records for it. And last but not least, the assessor's office. So the assessor's office did this really groovy thing around the 1940s. They actually went out and physically surveyed every building in the city. And then they put together these very comprehensive records and they took photographs of every building. And they did it more than once, but most of the records that I usually see come out of their office are from the 1940s. But basically, you just go in person to the assessor's office. They're very friendly. You just go to the desk. If you're the owner, it's no problem. If you are not the owner, you just need a letter, nothing fancy, nothing notarized, but that just says, I authorize this person to obtain copies of the building assessor cards. And then you ask for all the copies, all the building assessor cards. Sometimes what they'll do there is just give you the most recent ones, but if you want them all, you have to say to them that you want them all. And they'll just run a little print and charge you 10 cents a page, and off you'll go. And they look like this. They're usually about 2 pages long. There are various iterations of this form, but what I like about them is that they have a lot of useful information. So here you can see on each floor how many rooms were on each floor. So this is how you find out if there was a family room or a bathroom or some other kind of room in the basement, ground floor. It'll tell you how many units there were. It will tell you whether the basement was, how many cars were in the basement, what the walls are made out of, what the foundations are made out of, what the roof was made out of, the number of bathrooms, the number of kitchens. This one's got fire escapes and wall beds and closets. And then over here, you're going to see what the value of the property was. And then you'll cry a little bit because in 1909, this 6-unit building was worth $3,400. Oh, the olden times. So these are cool. I think these are really useful. I use these all the time also to prove, that there was something legal or not legal in a building. They are handy to have. And like I said, usually on the second page, there's a photo. So Okay, who owned it? So finding past owners is time consuming, but not that challenging. Again, you're gonna go to the assessor's office for this. That's where you're gonna go. You can start with your building records. So the building permit applications that you got copies of that we showed you earlier, where you can see the owner's name on the bottom of the page, that does help you. And almost every permit application is gonna say the name of the owner. So that's a good start, but the assessor's office has the real records for this. So you have to go there in person. They are open just like normal 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And they have basically any deeds after 1906. Prior to 1906, you might get lucky at the library because there were some books that were published that had deeds and registries and stuff. But I've never tried to dig into that in the past. So again, you make sure you've got your lot and block number. Make sure you have that magic lot and block number. You're going to need it, okay? And then on the property information map, I always start this from the most recent to the oldest. It's just easier to go that way. So on the property information map, you're going to see there's this little link that says Assessors Recorded Documents. You can just do this from your computer at home. It takes you to a little site here. Click on Advanced Search. You need that, otherwise it's not going to work. And then down here, you're going to plug in your blot and lock number and hit go. And it's going to basically return all of the past ownership transfers from 1990 until now, basically. And then you'll have a list of some names. So that can also help when you're running these searches, because now we're going to go back into cursive land. So I like to do the searches that I know I'm going to get things typed up where I can read them, and then go dig through the old stuff where I have to kind of figure it out a little bit. At the assessor's office, when you walk in, there's all these computers on one wall. You don't need to check in with anybody. You can just sit down at them. You can access their public index right from the home screen. And you're going to start with the sales ledgers. That's the first step one. They're organized by year. And I think also by name. And then you're going to go here to the grantee index and the deeds. So those are the steps, and I'll show you. So if you go to the sales ledger, what you're looking for here is they've got a block number up here. They've got the lot number, and that's going to tell you where your property is. And so here you can see Marie, I think this says Larkin, sold to Louise, and this says Hodgkinson, which is hard to read, but you sleuth it out when you see other pages. And this property was also owned by a bunch of people named McNear, and they also sold to Louise Hodgkinson. So sometimes properties were owned by multiple people. This wasn't even a very big or special lot. It was like a 25-foot wide lot, but 2 different groups of people owned it. And once you know her name, then you can go back here to the grantee index, and you go into the same kind of search. So this is organized actually by name, which is why you start with the sales ledger. The sales ledger from the lot and block number gets you to the name, and then you go into the grantee or the grantor, and you use the name. And so here, let's see, yeah. So here I was able to find that these are organized by name: Hodgkinson, Louise, sold from Larkin and McNear, and this is much clearer handwriting. And there's a deed. And then over here, the volume, the book, and the page number. And so that's going to tell you exactly where to go to get the deed. And then you go back out and you go to deeds and you find the deed. And they have at the assessor's office these little cards next to you on the table where you can write down the exact page number, and they'll print them out for you. And I think these are sort of fun. These are typewritten usually. But this property was sold for $10 in 1925. Oh, how things have changed. So you basically, once you know the name of a person who bought the property, that person, then you search for when they sold that property. And you do have to go through the records quite a bit to find those people. But you should be able to basically track every single transaction that happened at the property. It does take a little time though. You'll spend quite a bit of time at the assessor's office. Okay, who lived in it? Finding past tenants. Now, this is probably where, if you're doing the search, will take the most time. You will spend hours and hours and hours doing this, just because some buildings, well, some buildings had a lot of tenants. Some buildings didn't. But it's not always, there's not one source for this. And so you end up having to basically run the same searches on 3 or 4 different sources. So the sources that I use are the library, city directories. That's my #1 stop. And then I've been using Family Search, but Heritage Quest is another site that I think might be better. But Family Search is free and Heritage Quest is not. And then there's newspaper articles. So I'll run these searches pretty comprehensively. The city directories date way back. They start in, I think, the 1850s. Yeah, 1850. And they go all the way up to 1982. But after 1982, in that window of 1982 to now, it's a little bit trickier to find people. So there's a little bit of a gap. Maybe if anybody else here has secret ways for searching for tenants between 1982 and today, please feel free to drop it in the chat and share with us later. These are really old books. They have been scanned. They are all online. You can get to them from your computer. You don't need to go anywhere. You just log in with your library card like all the other stuff. And the best way to do this is start in 1982 and work your way backwards. And the reason is that from 1951 to 1982, you can search by the address. Very handy because you know the address. You don't know the tenant's name. But prior to 1951, it's only organized by the tenant's name. And so it becomes much more difficult to find. It's just more time consuming. So if you start in the 1980s and work backwards, you might already have a really good list or see that it's been the same exact people the whole time. And maybe it's always been the owner. Maybe it's never had a tenant in it. And so that can help you a little bit with your search. So when you open up these books online, they're huge, and there is a search function within the tool. It's okay. It's okay. But sometimes it's not great. It's not perfect. So I will run in the search tool the street number, and it will hopefully index every page in the volume that has those, and you can just click on them. It's really easy. Sometimes I'll run the names that I know. I'll run the name of the street sometimes, because these are organized, again, they're organized by street from 1951 to 1982, but the searches, you're gonna need to use your searches here, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. So collect all the names. There were, prior to 1951, there were these 3 directories that were published in 1933, 36, and 40. And it's all in the same exact directory list. But these were organized by address. So that's another way you can kind of fill in some of the gaps in the earlier years. Once you get to 1951, I would skip to these 3, search these 3, and then go back into the whole set. I also, another thing that I'll do as well is kind of run this parallel with either the Family Search or Heritage Quest, and I'll show you that. But once you know the name of anybody who lived here, it's much easier to find other people who lived here on the online resources too. So you do end up kind of doing a little bit of a shuffle back and forth, like, oh, this new name popped up in Heritage Quest. I better go back through the directories and see, was that person in the directories too? I'm going to show you both Family Search and Heritage Quest. Family Search is free. You do have to set up an account to use it, but they have birth records, death records, marriage records, census data. You literally put in the name of the person you're looking for. Always, always, always put in the very specific city, because otherwise you end up with records from all over the place and you will never get through them. So I was looking for this guy, Stefano De Maria, and here you can see, here's his death information. This is what you want. The census data is what you want. The census is amazing because people literally went door to door from the 1900s up until 1950, I think, was the last census that they did in person. It's also in cursive. It's handwritten, but they wrote tons of great information. So including address. These are organized by address. And when you click on somebody's link. So I'm going to click on Stefano de Maria's census data. Oh, you can also run searches over here if you're looking for birth, marriage, or death records. Family search does not have a good residence. The residence search does not work. I'll just, fair warning, does not work at all. But if I click on his page, now I can see a lot of information about him, but I can also see information about his family. So I can see his wife's page is on here. This is his sister and his 2 brothers. And you can open each one of these. You can look at basically anybody he's related to. It's really, you can get lost in the well a little bit. And then if I click up here on the actual document, it's great because it'll zoom in, and you can zoom in and out of this thing as much as you like. And he shows up over here. He was living on Union Street at the time. He was living in 232 or 242. And then he's the head of the household with his wife and his sister and his 2 brothers. And I'm gonna also show you the top part of this page because the census data is really cool. So you'll know their address, their relationship, their gender, their race, their age, how many children a woman had, how many lived. That's a little bit dark, but it's interesting. The place of their birth, and also the place of the birth of their father and their mother. Whether or not they can speak English, what year they immigrated to the United States, what their job is, what their trade is, and what industry they work in. And then over here, there's some stuff about education. Can you read? Are you able to write? Because we take it for granted that a lot of people, everybody now can do that, but back then, not so much. And then over here is the military stuff. Are you blind? Are you blind in both eyes? Because this was, World War I, right? Are you deaf and dumb? Not my words. Were you in the military service? And so there's just some really detailed information about people if you're looking for really detailed information about people. And as you find all these names, just keep writing them down. Just keep a running list because you're going to use them for newspaper searches and other things as well. You're going to go back to that city directories a bunch of times. So census data is really great. So Ancestry.com is associated with Heritage Quest. They do charge. It's basically the same data as we just looked at on Family Search, but it is indexed better. I ran the same searches on both just to see the difference. And this one came up with a lot more information than the Family Search. It is $16.50 a month to actually click on any of these records. You can run the searches and see the list for free, but you can't click into and look at any of the documents without a paid subscription. But I did find that it was a little bit better. And this one, I ran a keyword search just with the address, and it returned a ton more results than I had gotten on any of the other sites. So this is also a really good place if you want to start here instead of on the city directories, or if you want to, try to find the people within that missing window. But again, make sure you always put in the location. Make sure you put in San Francisco, California. Otherwise, you're going to end up with stuff from all over the place. And that takes us to newspaper articles, and we're getting pretty close here. So newspaper articles are a great resource. You will find, this is where you're going to find the good stories. You're not going to find stories on most of the other stuff, but this is where you're going to find weirdo articles about people. This is where you're going to find birth announcements, marriage announcements, like, a little bit more information about the people. So I run lots of searches on this too. I'll run all the addresses again. I'll run just the building number just to see sometimes. I'll run the names. I'll run the common misspellings of the names. But you can see over here, I think somebody earlier was talking about a bookie. So this was actually one of my projects at 1088 Fulton. And this woman suspected of doing, a bookmaking business was arrested at her apartment. And this one up here was a robbery, but it showed up for the old address. So, and this is a guy who I had not found in any of my research. So it also helps see, you might find some tenants this way too that you wouldn't have found in a different way. So newspapers.com does require a subscription. It's about $150 for the year. It's very well indexed, I find. So any keyword search that you run should return results. And again, do it by specific address. Do it always say you're in San Francisco, California, or wherever, because otherwise you end up with stuff in Stockton or who knows where. Most of these newspapers that I am subscribed to are specific to the Bay Area or California in general. So these have great stuff. Examiner, Chronicle, old stuff. You will find rental listings. You'll be sad to see how cheap it was to rent prior to 1990. It will hurt you a little. You'll see, people trying to sell the property. You'll see people advertising their services for sale. So you will be able to learn a little bit more about some of the people that you have found in the course of your other searches doing this. This is one of my favorite parts because it sort of brings it to life a little bit more. And then run the search again. It is time consuming, so that's just the nature of it. And I think the last but not least is the photos. I know we're pretty much at the hour, but I'm almost done. So photos, you're going to look at a variety of different places for these as well. But these are the two that I find the most beneficial. One of them is Old SF, and the other one is the Public Library Digital Records. And then the Public Library also has some records that are not online that you have to go in person. And their photo desk, which is all in that same 6th floor, all with the other stuff, is only open at very limited hours. So I'll give that to you. Old SF is just a website, you run it. The bigger the dot is, the more pictures there are of that thing. And you can just get nerdy zooming in on these. You want to look at Treasure Island or Alcatraz or the Bay Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge or, the beach. Literally, you can find some just incredible pictures on here. I just did a random, I clicked on a random button with 25 pictures on Steiner and Bush. And it brings up a carousel of all the pictures that the library has digitized for that location, for that intersection. If you click on the picture, it will just make it bigger, and you can do a screen grab kind of thing to save it or save as image. They're not high resolution. If you really want a high-res copy of it, you need to click on the public library link down here and then make a copy of this. You're going to need this to actually order the image, okay? And I'll show you that too. The other source is the Public Library's Digital SF. They have a lot of different types of photo collections. Most of them are probably not going to be useful to you. Some of them are just done by maybe a specific photographer or a specific artist, or a specific group of people. But just generally, there's good stuff in here. So I always come to this, and you'll see down here, if you scroll this right and left, there's the whole list of all of their collections. I find the History Center collection the most useful. The historical photograph collection next to it is also okay, but those are a little bit more, in my experience, stylized. They were shot for something specific. They're not as well indexed, I would say. And it's really simple, same thing as everything else. You run a search here, you put in your keywords. Again, run the street name, run the intersection, run people's names, the people that you've got the names of, run the building numbers with the street address. Like, run a few different searches because you'll come up with some different results. And it's not a massive collection, but I ran just San Jose Avenue. I got 31 results. Some of them were really cool. The SFMTA has a collection of photographs. So does the police department. So accidents, building of any muni lines, they would take a lot of detailed photos of those. So sometimes you can find your building on those two sets. And I'm pretty sure they're all just in this online database. But if you go to the 6th floor to the photo desk and ask, they will hook you up with all the photos you could imagine. And you just click on a picture, it'll pop up, you can scroll down, and then this is the information that you need to take to the library. They're gonna wanna know this number, the title, the date, and then this note, which folder the photograph appears in, right here. You can take that to the library to get a high resolution copy, or down here on the bottom left of the picture is a download button. You can just download it from your computer. It is not high resolution though. It will come in pretty grainy, but it depends on what you're using it for, right? And then next to it is the cart button where you can order a copy of the print. But when you order a copy of a print, it's complicated. You have to fill out a form that gives you permission to use it. You have to pay for the scans, anywhere from $15 to $50, plus shipping, and they will not take a credit card online. They will only take it in person. So there's a case to be made to just go to the 6th floor if you want the printed out copies and have them help you. You're probably going to have to go there anyway. Yeah, here's the form, that the authorization, the permission to use it. So the photo desk is only open on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 5, and then it's open on Saturday from 10 to 5, but they're closed for lunch from 12 to 1. And even though that's a small amount of time, it does impede you. Like when you're sitting there that 1 hour, if you're really cranking away on a bunch of research and you know they're not going to help you. That's how it is. Not all the photos have been digitized either. So if you really want to get a comprehensive search, you do want to go in person. The assessor building cards that I showed you earlier, they took photos every single time that they did a building survey. So they are on file there. You have to search them on their computer there, and then you have to have them pulled up. You have to write down a box number, and then they'll go into the depths and bowels of the library and bring out the box with a whole package full of pictures. And then you have to wear special gloves and sort through them to find the ones that are specific to you. And then generally they don't want to scan it for you. They will, but they just encourage you to take a picture. They'll just take a picture. Why do you want to pay for this? But that's up to you, whatever you want. Okay, that's the end. I did get through most of it in an hour. Any questions? Lisa, I see you have some questions about the property information map on here. So you were asking about the property information map specifically. Let me just go there. Yeah, this is fine. So historic preservation, I think you were looking at, let's see. Yeah, you're looking at the environmental information. So the property information map tells you a lot of stuff about your property, and I'll just give you a basic cursory review of this. Gives you all the addresses that the building department knows you have. Gives you your district supervisor. There's some stuff about the assessor. The zoning information tells you what zone you're in, so what you can build on your property, what height you can build to, if there's anything special that you can or can't do within your property. If it's in the port, most of your properties are not in the port. There may be some letters down here that the planning department has issued over time. There's a lot of stuff in this document, actually. Environmental information means you've been classified under what's called CEQA. It's the California Environmental Quality Protection Act. Or maybe not the word protection. Are you in an air pollution exposure zone? If you are, your project might mean that you need to provide additional ventilation. Archaeologically sensitive areas are places where if you were to dig down deep, you might hit something that's actually historically relevant. So think of south of Market, where every time you dig a big hole, you might hit a ship. For those of you that don't know, there's a bunch of sunken ships all over San Francisco from where the bay used to be the bay and is now full of land. So there are places where people, the city knows and the county knows, if you start digging, you might find something sensitive.
That's what made me curious. I guess it's where the old water chute used to be that went from Wood Street down to Page. So apparently there was a amusement park.
Yes,
and,
yes. There have been amusement parks in the yeah. There have been a lot of amusement parks in the city.
I was curious because it was just recently. It was like June 2023 that it was designated. So I was like, oh, maybe there's something. Maybe I should get my metal detector out.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes it could be Native American artifacts or pottery or things from when the missions were built.
Your guys' situation in my future.
Yeah. So I use this a lot because if you're on a steep hill and I'm doing an addition, that means more seismic, more structural, stuff like that. But yeah, the last thing that I will say, I know people are starting to jump off, is this is a lot of research. And so if you don't want to do it yourself, I am happy to do this for you, obviously for a fee, but I'll send that information out. There's no pressure. Feel free to just use the free resources. But I do love to do this kind of research. And my second company, Property Atlas, is basically aggregating property data. So that's kind of our mission. Okay, Kevin, I see some questions. Kevin, you've got your hand up. Are you on mute? Oh, you're still on mute.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I was wondering if you had to look up demolition of old buildings replaced by newer buildings. I'm interested in one out in the Richmond district, and it looked like maybe your permit records that you showed.
Permit records will have the demolition history for sure. Yeah, there would be a demolition permit if somebody tore something down. I mean, in olden times, they didn't really care if you tore something down. They care a lot more now. They care very much now. So I'm not sure when that became a big thing. I would probably guess sometime around the 1960s after redevelopment swept through and caused all of the problems that it caused. But before that, I don't think that they really cared.
Yeah, I'm looking for something just after the 06 earthquake. I'm hoping to get lucky with the building that replaced it anyway.
You know, the one thing that I like that's another reason I like the fire insurance maps is the building outline is on it and it shows you kind of what was there. So like my property here used to have a garage in the backyard and I really wish that I could put it back in there. I can't, but it's interesting to see that that used to be there and then got taken down at some point. But I've worked on a lot of projects where the house is the house is in nowhere near the same perimeter shape as it used to be on the Sanborn maps or the insurance maps. And, you know, you then can start to understand like what's been added on, what's been done illegally, what, you know.
I have a relative who had a house in the 1870s in the Dolores neighborhood. And when I went looking for it, it wasn't there. And then when I looked in the Sanborn maps, it had been picked up and moved back to the line. And it is still standing. It's just in a new location.
Yeah, well, they did that with all the earthquake checks too, right? I mean, they basically were like, take this. You've been here for 2 years. Take it and load it on a cart and take it to your property. So I still find a lot of earthquake checks in people's backyards that are now full of illegal units, usually. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Any other questions? Let me go back to the chat. Okay, well, thanks for sticking with me. I super appreciate it. I will circulate the copy of the presentation and then all the links and forms that I showed in here. And if you guys have any questions, let me know.
I had one more.
Yeah.
I remember I did a lot of my historical research back in the early 2000s, so a lot of this hadn't been digitalized a lot. So it's impressive to see how much has been scanned, put online. But I remember having to go, I think it was the planning department, and they requesting these cards that had little bits of microfilm on them for blueprints and stuff. Are those still accessible?
They have scanned pretty much all of that now in planning. Planning records are all digitized. You shouldn't have to do any microfilm research there anymore.
Cool. That was interesting because they would hand you these cards and tell you, oh, you can go to the building next door and look at them and stuff. And I don't know, I'd take a lot of photos of them. And
yes.
But I thought that was an unusual policy they had, but I don't know if they still have that anymore.
Yeah, they made a really good process and effort, and they've scanned and digitized pretty much everything. When I email planning now and I ask for copies, it just comes in a PDF or in a zip file with all the documents from all the various projects.
Do they charge to allow?
No, planning emails you and it's just a done deal. It's very easy. There are some departments that it's really easy to get stuff from and others where it's more cumbersome, but planning is easy. That's the one area where planning is easy.
That's new. It was never that easy before, so that's cool.
No, yeah. The library really is a great resource. If you go to the 6th floor and you tell them what you're looking for, those librarians can help you. There's stuff that I'm sure in books that I haven't looked in and in microfilm that I haven't looked in. They have a whole collection of books about architects and engineers. So if you want to find more about the architect or the engineer, you can usually find them in there in the older buildings. But they also have microfilm stuff in there too that I've never really spent time looking at because for my purposes, it's not necessary. But if you really are doing a deep dive, get cozy in the library.
I'm sure I spent a lot of time there. Early 2000s, that's all we had was microfilm to work with.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Okay,
I'm
everybody.
interested in permit records. Those go back to, you said 1906. I never had access to those or saw
Yeah,
those.
permit records go back to 1906. Oftentimes, though, if the building address changed, you won't get the earlier copies. So like when I ran one from my property at 1765 Oak, and that's the address that I used, the records only went back to, I think, 1926 or something, whenever that address changed. And then when I ran the new search with 1721 Oak, I got like 4 more permits. Like when the garage was added, when some other work was done. So it was really, that actually filled in some gaps about what had happened. But nothing before 1906, yeah.
That's a SF planning department.
That's the building department, that's building records.
Okay, you can request those and that's a free request.
It's a free request. If it's less than 100 pages of permit applications, they'll email it to you. If it's more than 100 pages, they're going to make you go pick it up in person, and then they're going to charge you 10 cents a page. The records department is slowly entering the digital age of sharing information. They're not quite there. During COVID, when they were shut down, they would email me everything. They would email me plans too, and it was great. But they stopped doing that after COVID, and I was really sad about it. I was like, you already figured this out. Why don't you just keep it going? But no.
And this is the old permits that go back to like 1906 that you can access.
Yeah. If there was a permit for it, you can find it. Yeah.
That they email you, or is it like on microfilm and they have to print it up, or?
Permit applications. So the forms, they will email to you. Those are all digitized.
Wow.
Drawings are not all digitized, but they will digitize them for you. And then in that case, they will not email to you, but they'll print it out for you and you can go pick it up.
Cool.
But when you're there, they sit you down at a computer, they give you access, and then they go do research for you. So you start looking at the permits, the more recent permits that were already digitized, 1980s until now. But they'll be like, hey, I just dropped another one in there from 1950, or I dropped another one in there from 1942 or 1926. So they're over on the side finding whatever they can find, and then they'll put it in for you to look at.
Cool.
Lisa, yes, I see you have your hand up.
I have one more question for you, and thank you for staying after a little.
No problem.
My address seems to have always been different house numbers, which again speaks back to it being like a working class house.
Yeah.
So do I just need to search in the different variations of the numbers? Because sometimes it's listed the full address dash the second address number.
Yes. Yes.
So I just need to do all variations.
Yeah, and something a little trick that I play too is once I get the oldest map, the oldest fire insurance map with the numbers on it, I will also look at the properties on each side.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And then I'll put every single integer on the search. So if next door is 1723, I'll say 17, 25, 27, 29, 30, 31, 33, and then whatever all the way up to the next address next door. Okay. Because sometimes, like, contractors were not always the most careful when they were filling out the forms. And you'll see it when you look through the permit applications, they'll say stuff on it that is not right. Because they're in a hurry.
It's for address dash 4 address number, like the full address, 4 digits dash 4 digits for the range.
I would run them all.
And sometimes it's 4 dash 2 for just the difference. So it's maddening, but at least the addresses stayed the same.
That does help. That does help. And it is like single family homes and even like 2 and 3 unit buildings. There's not going to be a ton of documents at the permit department. Just people, they didn't have to do drawings for a long time. But whatever you can find is gold, honestly. And I love it because I can sort of tell the story of a building through their permit applications now. Many of them were built and then a legal unit was added immediately, like within a year. And then they got caught and then they took it out and then they put it back in and then they got caught and then they took it back in. So sometimes you can see these crazy Frankenstein things that have happened to the buildings over time. And sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes it's just a nice clean permit history. Oh, the one thing I didn't share with you guys, and I'll put it in the link when I send it, is the David Rumsey map. There's this amazing aerial photograph of the city from 1938, and it's very high resolution, and you can zoom all the way into, the backyard teeth of the cat. And it is interesting because it does show you kind of what the shape of the whole block was in 1938. And it is crazy to look at the whole city and see what parts of it, even in 1938, had not been developed. So sometimes I've used that too to prove that the rear addition was always there. Planning will accept that as proof of legitimacy for what it's worth. But that's just a cool map in general. Okay, well, thanks all for staying on. I appreciate it. And I will let you all go on to have a great night, have dinner probably. And if you have any questions, just let me know. You're also welcome. Okay, bye.